Hello, I hope you're doing well. I'm here to discuss everything that I read in the month of March, which was a lot. I read 13 books in total. I really ramped up my reading this month, partly because it's book prize season. There are so many books nominated for a number of different awards that I wanted to get to, and so I'm going to go through and discuss my thoughts and feelings about these books that I read. These aren't intended to be fully comprehensive reviews, but just more my general impressions of these books and any interesting points that I want to make about them. But I would love to hear if you have also read any of these books or want to discuss any other books that you read over the past month in the comments below. Please let me know about that. And first, I just want to briefly mention a couple of fun bookish things that I got to do in the past month. So I was kindly invited to the ceremony for the Nero Book Awards, and this is a book award that awards books in a number of different categories and then sets those categories against each other so that there's one overall winner that wins the gold award for this prize. And so it was great to see the author Colin Barrett there, because his debut novel Wild Houses won the debut fiction category, but the overall winner was Maurice and Maralyn by Sophie Elmhirst from the nonfiction category. And I'd read this a few months ago, and it's such a great and terrifying adventure story following an English couple that get stranded in the Pacific, get shipwrecked in the Pacific after a whale crashes into their boat, and how they survive for a long time at sea before being rescued, and then following their story afterwards. And it's just such a powerful and unique relationship, and it was really wonderful seeing her accept the award and her excitement about this. I was also invited to see a reading and discussion with the Dutch author Angelo Tijssens, which I know I'm mispronouncing that, but I'm not sure how to pronounce his surname. And this was translated by Michele Hutchison, who's a former winner of the International Booker Prize for her translations. And it was really interesting to hear him going into the construction of this book, because it's a very constrained novel, very short book, but very constrained in the information that it gives you. It just gives you more the impressions of a man who returns to his mother's house after she has died, and reconnecting with his very first lover there, a man that he was really passionately involved with, but has since left behind. And it's about kind of that reconnection and reconnecting with one's past, especially when there's so many painful things about that past, and nothing is really overtly explained, but you just get these kind of sensory impressions and of the emotional turmoil of his past. And so I thought this was a really unique novel, and it was really interesting to hear them discussing it. Now, for all the books that I read this past month, there is quite a few from the Women's Prize, because that's the one that I've been primarily concentrating on. And so I read the novel The Persians by Sanam Mahloudji, and this novel I had a really mixed experience with this. I really enjoyed it overall, and I thought there were some very interesting things about it, but it follows multiple generations of Iranian women between Iran and America, and the book is it kind of reminded me of the television show Absolutely Fabulous, because the dynamic in this between two of the primary characters, there's a woman who is very outrageous and very outspoken and very materialistic and very status driven, who is living in America, and the entire plot partly centers around a case that she has become embroiled in, because at the very beginning of the book she is accused of soliciting in prostitution, because when she was being intimate with a man who turned out to be an undercover police officer, she told him that in order to consummate this, he would need to pay her a lot of money, and so she is put on trial for this, and there's a whole question of like whether she was just making a joke because she felt like she was being sort of racially stereotyped, and or was she really expecting to be paid this money or not, and so the whole case centers around that. But it reminds me kind of Absolutely Fabulous, because she also has a niece who is very responsible, wants to do the right thing, and so the dynamic between them as her sensible niece is trying to take measures to protect her and build up a legal defense for this case, while she is totally oblivious to it, dismissive of it, and doesn't take it all seriously, even though she might come very close to losing her business and losing her visa in America, and she might have to move back to Iran. So that's what like the central plot revolves around, but it's much more also about just tracing the different generations of the women in this family. So this outrageous woman's mother as well, Elizabeth, who is still living in Iran, and along with her daughter, and so following these different women's perspectives, and how secrets about their family are uncovered over a long period of time, and so the story is really engaging and fun for those reasons, like right in like a dark way, because there's a lot of edgy humor in this, but also it's really like fascinating how it gets into both the history of Iran and the kind of like mythology that can develop around a nationality, and but also about this clash between a self-belief and the reality of a situation, and how it explored that I thought was really compelling, and as the kind of illusion of these characters' lives that they've built up around themselves, and how they manage their various sense of privilege and status, I found to be really interesting, although there were some parts where it got slightly too cartoonish, I thought, in how I found the tone of this to be quite uneven, because it would move back and forth between these kind of two different modes of storytelling, and so yeah, I kind of struggled with that a bit. There were a couple of lines that I thought were really striking in this novel. There's one line where it says, "Aren't we all the ghosts of an unchosen past?" And I really liked the almost like Ibsen quality of that kind of line, of how we can't really help what we have inherited, and that inheritance is going to impact us whether we accept it and tell people about it or not. And also there's another line by Elizabeth, kind of the grandmother and matriarch of this family, who says, "We are so far from what we think we are in our minds, you and me," and it's this kind of clash between self-belief and self-creation, and then coming up against reality in this way. So I thought this was a very good novel overall, and one that I really enjoyed and gave a really original perspective. And I also read A Good Girl by Aria Aber, actually directly before I read this novel, and it was a kind of strange coincidence that immediately after reading this novel, at the very beginning of this book, it's remarked between two characters. One character is sort of chastising the other, like, "Oh, be a good girl," and it just seemed like a kind of funny coincidence that line came up immediately in this novel after reading this. And Good Girl, in some ways, like, is dealing with similar issues to do with a sense of nationality and inheritance between two countries, but in a very different context, where it follows a young woman in Germany who is the daughter of Afghan parents, and her parents had to flee their native country, and since living there, her parents have had to take menial jobs where previously they were quite well educated and had really really established jobs, but since moving to Germany, they've had to take more menial jobs, and so have had to really like step down in kind of economically and socially in their lives. But also she receives and is aware of a lot of prejudice about Afghans and people from the Middle East, and about her wrestling with her heritage, and she actively hides her heritage from her friends and people that she knows, and it's about this this difficulty she has between trying to build a productive future for herself and being aware of the expectation of her parents, who really want her, to be a so-called good girl and do the right things to establish herself, and then her wrestling with kind of self-destructive type habits and trying to rebel against this past which she is rejecting, and wanting to create her own sense of future for herself. So she is applying to universities, and she really excels academically, but she also gets really heavily into partying, and she gets into a very bad relationship with a man who's a writer, and who she's very drawn to and attracted to, even though he is abusive to her and treats her really badly and negligently, and it follows her through this chaotic time as she goes out clubbing. She takes a lot of drugs and gets involved in this whole lifestyle, which kind of brings her on a downward spiral rather than progressing to a more like substantial future, and how she wrestles with her past in this way, and her mother has died not so long ago, so she's also dealing with the grief of the loss of her mother, and trying to live up to her father's expectations, and I found it really touching, the relationship between her and her father, where when she's separated from him, she has a lot of conflicted feelings about him, but when they're together, they do fight, but can also have these beautiful moments of intimacy, like it describes in one part how she's like grooming his eyebrows which have grown really long, and so she's kind of trimming them and trying to take care of them, and that just felt like such an intimate and sweet gesture between a daughter and a father, and yeah, so I found this to be quite a emotional journey, and of a young person sort of wrestling with all of these different issues, and really shocking in some sections about the racism that she witnesses and experiences, and so it feels like understandable in a way that she would hide her past in this way and pretend to have come from a different nationality that she does. So yeah, I thought this was quite a good novel overall, although personally I get a bit impatient with narratives that follow characters that are just kind of ceaselessly partying and ceaselessly getting into these self-destructive habits, which they know are bad for them, and I can understand why she was wrestling with all these things, and partly just being a young person and wanted to go out and live life in this way, but yeah, I get slightly impatient with that narratives, but it does take quite a unique take on this. I Will Crash by Rebecca Watson, which is a novel I've been really wanting to get to because I admired her debut novel Little Scratch so much, and this novel, like that first book, is written in a kind of interesting way where the prose are kind of scattered across the page in this way, which is almost poetic, but it's kind of it's bouncing back and forth between really internal picture of her thoughts and everything that's going through her mind, but then also everything that's happening around her, and messages that she receives and interruptions that she has, and so is reflecting lived experience in this way, that while we are having all these thoughts and memories and contemplating things about our lives, that the world is happening around us, and we have to deal with things that people say to us, of interruptions that are made. And so at one part, Jehovah's Witnesses come and ring on her doorbell, and that kind of interrupts the stream of her thoughts and everything that she's going through. And so it really reflects experience in this way, and in quite a striking way, an effective way. So I really appreciated this perspective, although it takes a little while to get used to, obviously, of rather than just reading straightforward prose. I almost had to like tune my mind into the structure of this and how it worked. Even though I'd read her, before, it's such a different form of narrative than a traditional kind, and it's really powerful. So it primarily centers around a young woman and her very conflicted feelings about her brother, who she has been estranged from for quite a while, because he was really he tormented her horribly throughout her life, and so she's tried to make a clean break with him, but then it's confronting his existence, and but also confronting her past with him, and trying to deal with that. And so there was one line that I found really striking, where she's having this almost drunken conversation with a stranger in a bar, and she says, if someone has been a part of your life forever, kicking them out doesn't get rid of them, even if you never see them again. And I feel like, that's really true. Even if we choose to expel someone from our lives that we know is really harmful to us and not a good person to have in our lives, they still remain present in our minds and our memories, and can kind of affect our experience in this way. And I thought it was really unique how she brought into this book the author Gertrude Stein, because her male partner, he is a kind of Gertrude Stein scholar, and so there's some open discussions about Gertrude Stein's work in this, and her kind of theory about how lived experience can be translated into literature in a unique way, and how they're in the spaces of what is not said in the text. A lot more can be said in that, and that's kind of what Rebecca Watson is doing in this as well, or at least doing in a different way, and I found that really powerful. And it's also really unique how it deals with the continuing trauma that she's experienced of having been raped at one point, and how this still affects her life, but also how to manage that in her intimate life, and what details to reveal to other people, and how to physically manage with this, as well as dealing with all of the inner turmoil that this has caused as well. I found to be really powerful. Getting back to the Women's Prize, I also read The Artist by Lucy Steeds, and I had really high expectations for this novel, because I'd seen a lot of readers praising it, and I feel like it mostly met my expectations for this. So this is set in Provence in France in the 1920s, and during this very hot summer, and this very self-contained environment of a remote house. And I had visited Provence for the first time last summer, when it was at the height of lavender season, and it's such a beautiful countryside, but also such like intense sounds and smells, and such a beautiful landscape. And so I felt like this novel really brings the atmosphere of that alive, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it on a personal level. But it's also a very tightly contained drama, because in this remote house there is a famous artist, Edouard Tartuffe, and but he is also incredibly reclusive, and so he lives there with his niece, who is very quiet and just diligently sees to all of his needs, and a ambitious young journalist named Joseph comes to this house to try to interview this great artist who's known as the Master of Light, and to find out more about him, but unwittingly finds immediately when he arrives that he becomes a model for the artist who wants to create this painting of him holding an orange, and so that's how the novel begins. And then certain secrets and mysteries are revealed over the course of the story, and there's a lot of tension in this household because Edouard Tartuffe, he's an incredibly domineering personality, and really abusive, and really emotionally volatile, and so I could really feel the tension of this the atmosphere of this household, and it's interesting how it develops, and things unravel, and I feel like the overall central mystery isn't so mysterious, but then there are other smaller mysteries and secrets that are revealed over the course of the book that I found a lot more intriguing, and just as I felt like the atmosphere between these three characters was growing a bit static because it was just between the three of them, and that's all we were really seeing. There's a great scene when this group of people descend upon the house, these artistes of people that follow, that are very cultural but also very pretentious, who descend upon this house, and that kind of broke up the atmosphere, and I felt like that arrived at just the right point in this novel, and so I really enjoyed that aspect. And I also really enjoyed how the great patron of the arts, Peggy Guggenheim, enters into the story herself, and that I thought that was done in a really fun way. But overall, like the message too about women's involvement in the arts, and whether female artists are taken as seriously as men. I thought that was all handled really well and in a really interesting way, and how it was incorporated into the plot of the overall story. But in a way, I felt like the drama of this was it felt almost like a bit too well crafted, like it was crafted like in a creative writing class or something. I mean, that was just sort of my sense that this was a drama that was like set out in this way, and it was done very well. But I guess I wanted a bit more like spontaneity to it. I don't know if that's like a valid criticism or not, but yeah, that was just like my sense overall. But I did really enjoy it, and thought it was well done overall. But yeah, I just had these slight reservations about it in this way. I also read a few books nominated for the Women's Prize for nonfiction. So there was By the Fire We Carry by Rebecca Nagle, who's of Cherokee descent, and who is a journalist, and she gives an account of the Native American struggle and fight for justice and for land in America over the centuries, building out of this very recent case, which was recently settled in the Supreme Court in 2020 between the Muskogee people and the state of Oklahoma, and concerning a case where a Muskogee man was involved in a murder, and he is imprisoned and on death row, and the appeals for his case are connected to this larger debate about reservation land in Oklahoma, and so becomes a much bigger case than just this individual story, and I thought it was really interesting how she develops out of this in a comprehensive look at the history of Native American life in the United States, and the really long fight for justice, and this made me aware of so many things which I wasn't told about and educated about when when I was growing up, and I don't know if that's changed in the educational system, and I hope it has, because there are so many things about this past which I think are so important to be aware of and to know, and part of the tragedy of this is when it gets to this Supreme Court case, the author and the Native American people are aware that the Supreme Court justices themselves aren't fully aware and are understanding of this history, and how that this all comes down to their decision is really tragic. And but also I was so shocked reading this that to learn that both historically and in more recent times, that even when the courts decide in the favor of the Native American people, there have been instances when the executive branches of the government have just ignored those rulings and carried on as they wanted to, and so how the democracy really isn't functioning in the way that it should. In this way, like, felt really surprising and scary to me, especially given everything that's happening in the States at the moment. So I've seen some criticism of this book, that because it has to do a lot with land law, that it can be a bit dry, and of course, like, legal matters can get quite dry, but because this has such personal meaning to so many people in the States, and so many different Native American nations, that it felt really gripping in this way, and I was really keen to read more, both about this history and the outcome of these different cases. So yeah, this felt like a really powerful book to me, and I wish it had been shortlisted for the prize. What the Wild Sea Can Be by Helen Scales, which has such a vibrant and striking cover, and this looks at the state of the environment in our oceans, and threats to sea life, and to plant life in the seas, and how this poses a threat to humanity itself, of its loss and its destruction over time, partly through global warming, and through overfishing, and the very real pressing threat of deep sea mining, and how destructive this is to ecological systems, which in many cases we aren't even aware of yet, and it's really shocking and terrifying reading about instances where the environment was being farmed or plundered in a way which destroyed these habitats and animal and plant life there, that scientists might not even have been aware of yet, and how the loss of these might be the loss of some really vital elements and forms of life that could be important to our survival, and of course, as we all know, like, ecological systems, they're very finely balanced in the life that is there. So when that is disrupted, that it can have lots of really scary unintended consequences. And so Helen Scales looks at a number of instances of this through different life forms, like penguins and whales, and how those certain species have been impacted directly by all of this farming of the ocean, and changes to the environment over time. And she also examines the changes to the environment from ancient times, and the creation of our world, and how there have been instances where there have been big, huge changes, but as I'm sure many of us are aware, the immediate dramatic changes which are occurring are completely unprecedented, and there's a lot of scientific knowledge about this. We understand exactly what is going on and and why things are going wrong, but just the challenge of knowing how to enact positive change about this. And she's really pragmatic about going through these things to look at how there are some positive and negative technological developments which can assist in this, but also research and understanding and awareness of different systems of how we can help support the oceans which are dying. And so looking at specific issues to do with crossbreeding between corals and to make them more robust and resistant to heat and extreme heat and light, or more extreme than they've been experiencing before. And so yeah, I thought this was really powerful at all for like such a huge, enormous subject, to look at it in a balanced way, to recognize that there are really terrifying issues there, but rather than just being pessimistic about it, kind of balancing that with some optimism and developments, and looking at really pragmatic steps that we can take to help protect the oceans. And there's a whole list at the back of this book of organizations that the reader can get in touch with and find out more about these things, but also to get involved in helping protect the oceans. The memoir "1,000 Threads" by Neneh was such a pleasure to read, to learn about her life, of the struggles that she's gone through in her life, of her very diverse upbringing, of growing up both in Sweden and New York City, and the different influences from her Swedish mother and her stepfather, American jazz player stepfather, who raised her, and so looking at this confluence of cultures, but growing up being fostered in this very artistic community, and how that is both informed her music and inspired her as an individual. And I found this a really moving and well-written account of her life, and I loved how when there were small parallels that I saw with my own life, when she talked about how when she was younger, and every time that they came back from America to Europe, they would bring with them jars of Skippy peanut butter, which is something I do every time I go back to America. I bring jars of Skippy peanut butter back here to the UK, because Skippy peanut butter just tastes better than any other peanut butter that I've experienced in the UK. And also like a small instance when she eventually moves to London, and how she lives in Maida Vale for a period of time. And I lived in Maida Vale in North London for a very short time. I mean, it's a very expensive area, so I couldn't afford to move there permanently. But yeah, it was I just enjoyed those small parallels in the story. But yeah, how she describes her artistic process. I mean, I'm not entirely aware of her back catalog of music. I mainly know the hit songs, and so but she does talk a lot in that about the creation of these songs and different albums, and her music videos. So it was fun to go and watch her music videos. Famously, she appeared on Top of the Pops while very pregnant, and this became a very controversial thing. Now, though, for her, she was like, well, that's just where I was in my life, and it happened. I had this hit song come out at the same time that I was pregnant, and so why hide that fact? But then also to see the music video for Man-Child with the baby that she was pregnant with during that Top of the Pops performance, then appears in that video as she's holding the baby, and I found that very moving to read about. And so I've gone to listen to more of her music since then, and also the music of her many different musical family members, but also found it really heart-wrenching in some instances of this, of describing her relationship with her father, and his struggle with drug addiction, and her own struggle with substance abuse and alcohol when she got to partying too much in her life, and also her experience of rape in London, and so it was really emotional read, as well as a really inspiring one. Going back to fiction, I also read Somewhere Else by Jenni, which is a novel I, when the long list for the fiction prize was first announced, it wasn't one that I was most immediately drawn to, but then I read an interview with the author on the Women's Prize website where she was discussing her influences, and one of her literary influences was Joyce Carol Oates, who of course is my favorite author, and so that made me much more intrigued to read this novel. And in some ways it is kind of like a Joyce Carol Oates novel in that it begins with this very dramatic occurrence and then follows the reverberations of that through a life and through different generations. And so the story begins in the early 1900s with a girl named Rosa, who's only 5 years old, and she narrowly escapes being killed in the pogroms. Of her family is being killed for being Jewish, and she only just survives that, and so moves from Europe to Scotland to live with a foster family, and about her experiences growing up there and living there throughout her long life. And it follows her life until she almost reaches the age of 100. And so obviously there's lots of political and social change during the time, and the novel charts that in a way that shows how there is movement in our society, how there is some progress, but then also some regression, and some things which occur over and over again. And so it is moving, following her personal story and the stories of some of the individuals of her family and her descendants, and also the descendants of her neighbors. And I felt like maybe it was slightly too ambitious in trying to show and contain too many characters' lives, because I did grow confused at some points about who is who, and following their stories as it really hopscotches, through across a century, and at some points it felt like, okay, now we're at the Great Depression, so we're going to deal with that, but it does give quite a new perspective on some sections of this history, but also overall there was a line I found really striking, where she writes, "You can't escape what people think you are," and there's a really strong sense in this novel that the perceptions of people, especially people who have been displaced, and stereotypes that are made about them, and how difficult it is wrestling with that, and I feel like that's handled in some of the other novels as well, like Good Girl, and so I found that really moving, and some sections of this to be really powerful. So I thought it was a really great novel overall, although that it grew slightly unwieldy in its story in trying to contain the lives of all these many different characters. And there are a number of books that I've made individual videos about, so I'm not going to go into them in too much depth, but a novel that's really stuck with me is Nesting by Roisin O'Donnell, and this story which is so intense in relating the immediacy of the central character's experience immediately after leaving her husband with her 2 young children while she is pregnant, and the struggles that she faces to try to establish an independent life for herself, but also to stay away from that marriage which she has left before, because her husband is so manipulative and controlling, and really scary, and to show this, and the patterns that someone goes through in trying to extract themselves from an abusive relationship, and it was really moving, and I found this a completely gripping story and a very emotional experience. Now, Dream Count is a really tricky novel to talk about because I have so many feelings about the author and statements she's made about trans women itself, and so I've made a whole video going really in depth into that, and I was really uncertain about whether to make this video or not, but felt like I really had to, after reading this novel and then reading a number of interviews, to just give my own personal take on how I feel about this and my understanding of it. And I'm totally open to other people's opinions, and I know there's a lot of debate about it, but I think it is worth talking about. But there are a lot of things to appreciate and enjoy in this novel, and I found that especially when some of the central characters come together in this story to show how they are debating a number of different issues to do with life and being a woman in society today, being a Black woman in society today, and the movement between America and Nigeria, and following their different stories and experiences and points of view on things. I feel like it has a lot to say, and I understand why some people will read Adichie and feel that her beliefs and statements that she's made outside of her fiction don't impact the experience of the fiction itself, and that there are other people that just won't read her at all because of these statements, and of course that all comes down to individuals feeling and about these things, and about what authors they want to read and don't read, and I think this could very well be shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction, so that brings into a whole other discussion about this, and I guess we'll have to deal with that when the announcement is made later this week. There are also a few books that I've read which have been listed for the International Booker Prize. So there's Hunchback, the Japanese novel, which for being such a short book, I think is really powerful and really complex in the way that it presents the story of a disabled woman who has a condition where she's frequently hunched over, where breathing is a real struggle for her moment to moment, and following her as she lives in a care home which she herself administers and owns, because she's very wealthy, and how she spends a lot of her time writing sexual stories online for money, but also has a secret social media account where she posts very inflammatory things, and so exploring the complexity of her experience and her state in life, and trying to figure out how to manage that, and her frustration with a lot of these issues, I thought was so powerfully conveyed. And there are a couple of books that I just read with my online book club. So there's the Under the Eye of the Big Bird, which is such a unique book, which doesn't follow any one character necessarily, because it's more like short stories or islands of experience, which are connected through developments of technology and evolutions of society and evolutions of humans over time, as humans and technology become so intertwined over a long period of time, over not just hundreds of years, but thousands and thousands of years, and none of it is very specified of what period of time we are, and it kind of moves backwards and forwards in time, but the movement of the story over the book as a whole makes this much bigger and powerful statement about how we organize our civilizations, and how we deal with all of the technology, and in how that we incorporate that into our very survival and our existence. I found it really striking, and it's had a really haunting effect on me. And finally, the novel that I just finished reading and that I just started discussing with my online book club is The Book of Disappearance by Ibtisam, Azem. And this novel, which was first published in its native language over a decade ago, and but only just recently published here in the UK in the past several months, and that it feels like it has even more relevancy today, or maybe relevance in a different way, as it follows this fantastical occurrence when all of the Palestinians suddenly disappear from the state of Israel, and following the outcome of that and the impact that has on a friendship between a Jewish Israeli man and a Palestinian, and I found this be so powerful, so complex and fascinating in the way that it looks at this much larger political issue and ongoing conflict. And so I feel like I have a lot more to say about this book, but I'm still processing it and still discussing it with my book club. So I don't want to say too much about it yet, but I think it's a really great novel. So those are all the books that I read over the past month. Like I said, I'd love to know if you have also read any of these books and what you think about them, if you agree with me or disagree with me, or if you want to let me know about anything else that you've read in the past month, whether it's prize nominated or not. I would love to hear about that. But I hope you're doing well, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.